After a church service once, a pastor was looking forward to greeting a friend of his at the door. So when his friend approached the door, the pastor said to him, "You need to join the army of the Lord." The friend replied, "I'm already in the army of the Lord, Pastor." Pastor questioned him, "Well, how come I only see you come to church on Christmas and Easter?" He whispered back, "I'm in the Secret Service." When it comes to following Jesus, there is no hidden agenda. There is no secret service. We're undivided. We're walking in one accord until He comes. And as we're coming together for a special time of communion today, it's important to come back together in one accord. And look around us, we're all sitting here together. But what the song said is that in our hearts, we need to be in one accord. And as we bring our series on the three angels, I thought it would be great to spend some time looking at Jesus. So I invite you to turn your Bibles with me for the shortest sermon that I will preach for this quarter. You can say amen. Into Revelation chapter 14. Behind our differences lies a deep yearning for each of us to get to know Jesus, to come and meet the Lamb. And until we do, until we behold Him in all that He is, we'll always struggle to overcome our differences. So, we come back to the Lamb. So we're going to read and study through the first 5 verses of Revelation 14. And many of the studying texts we'll be looking at, I'll show on the slide. But otherwise, I just invite you to read with me. And as we look at a final people, at a people who are the surviving army of Jesus, there are 3 things I want us to observe. The first is the look of these companions, these final companions. So I read from verse 1 of Revelation 14. "Then I looked, and behold, a lamb standing on Mount Zion." What mount? Mount Zion. "And with him 144,000, having his Father's name written on their foreheads." So first we're going to check out the appearance of this special people. How many of them are there in this Bible verse? 144,000, okay? We'll take a close look at that in a minute. But first, let's look at where they're standing, okay? Which mount is it again? Mount Zion. Now, in the Old Testament, Mount Zion had a special meaning for God's people, okay? It's not like they're at the top of One Tree Hill or something like that. They're not at the top of any mountain. They're at the top of a very important mountain. From Joel 2, verse 32, it says, "And it shall come to pass that whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved." All right, wonderful promise there. "For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there shall be deliverance, as the Lord has said, among the remnant whom the Lord calls." So in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, we have a place of deliverance. So when God's people are described to be standing on Mount Zion, okay, amongst the Lamb, these are our delivered people. Can you say amen? We have a people who have overcome the temptations, overcome all the burdens. We have a people who have been delivered, okay? Talk about an army of the Lord. This is a place where the army has already won. And so the first glimpse we get of God's people, the look of them, is that they're a people who have been delivered. If you've been having one of those weeks where you're wondering when that silver lining is going to come through the clouds, okay, we don't find it in looking amongst ourselves. We find it in resting in what the Lamb is doing for us. We're delivered through Jesus. And so God's people find their way at Mount Zion. Furthermore, how many of them were on Mount Zion again, back in Revelation 14, verse 1? 144,000. Now, without getting in too deep, it's important to note that many have taken this quite literally, to see that in heaven, there'll be actually 144,000 people there, and they're actually going to be separate from the rest of us who might be there. Some have even suggested that only 144,000 will get to heaven. That's an interesting one. But if we take a look at what the Old Testament tells us, it gives us a deeper picture of this number. And as a little hindsight, okay, back in chapter 7, we saw that this was actually a list of 12,000 from 12 different tribes, who were actually a different set of tribes that we had. Some of the names are different from the Old Testament. So it's a picture of 12,000, okay, times 12,000. 12, okay? So we've got 12 times 12,000. So we'll bring it to the Old Testament again and take a look at what this number might mean. So here in Numbers 31, take a note of these Bible verses if you can. Or you can turn there if you're able to. Numbers 31, verses 4 and 5. 1,000 from each tribe of all the tribes of Israel you shall send to where? To the war. So there were recruited from the divisions of Israel 1,000 from each tribe, 12,000 armed for war. This wasn't just an independent statement about 12,000 or 1,000 from each tribe. This happened a few other times in the Old Testament. So when God's people, when His army were getting ready for war, He'd get 12,000 of them. Do you see that there? Now when we turn to the book of Revelation and we see 12 times 12,000, it's like an elite picture of an army. It's like the best of the G.I. Joes who want to follow Jesus. Okay? So this is the best of the best who are willing to stand up for Jesus. So the number that we have in Revelation, it's more symbolic than anything. It's symbolic of God's delivered people. Furthermore, it's symbolic of God's army. Do you see that there? You know, before we're waiting to be finally delivered, before Jesus comes, we don't have the privilege just to sit back and let Him win the war for us, okay? No, we have to go out into the battlefield every day. We serve Him, we wrestle, okay, with Him, and He always comes through with us, for us. But it's a picture of being God's army today. So that's the look of God's people. Keep your nose there in Revelation 14 though, and look in verse 1. This is the final thing we'll see there. What was on their foreheads there? The name of the Lamb's Father, right? In other manuscripts, it actually says the Father's name and the Lamb's name, okay? So what we have is a stamp here of a name that they're willing to bear. Now, I'm just going to play with my sticker here. Sorry, Julie, if you don't mind. If I take my name here and I was to wear it right here, all right? Excuse people if this looks a bit odd. What am I trying to tell you if I was to walk around like, hey everyone, guess who's in town? You wouldn't be too hard to guess what my name is, right? Now, the thing is, something is very symbolic if I'm going to put it right on my forehead, okay? But what happens up here, as we've been learning this week in our Sabbath school lesson, is the most important thing. What happens in our minds. This is where we choose to believe in God. This is where we're willing to stand up as His army today. So if they're wearing their Father's name, okay, this is what they're holding closely to their hearts. This is the seal of God, as it tells us in Revelation chapter 7. This is what marks them as God's true people. And I'd like to see this as symbolic again, okay? Symbolic of who they're willing to stand up for. And in their own minds, in their hearts, who it is that they're treasuring more than ever. So today, we don't actually have names written on our foreheads, but it most definitely can be written on our hearts. So before Jesus comes, He's looking for an army who are willing to have Him, a love for Him, undivided, locked into their minds and nothing else. All for Jesus, right? So this was the look of the final companions. Come back to the text though in Revelation 14, and now we'll read verses 2 and 3. And then we get to the love of the companions. Can you say love? Love. And this is what they truly treasured above all. Reading verses 2 and 3 here. And I heard a voice from heaven like the voice of many waters, and like the voice of loud thunder, and I heard the sound of harpists playing their harps. Verse 3, they sang as it were a new song before the throne, before the 4 living creatures and the elders, and no one could learn that song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. Now we have a picture of the lifestyle of these people, okay? What was really on their hearts, of what they wanted to do. And usually we see God having a voice like many waters, or having the harps being playing, okay? We can look at a few of the places in the Bible which support that. But in this case, we hear these noises from God's people, okay? So the very voice which brings praise to God, which reflects His character, it's now coming from His people. And notice there in verse 3, it says that 144,000, okay, who were redeemed from the earth, they were singing that song which no one else could learn except them. All right? I don't know if you've ever tried to learn a song in another language, or just a song that the melody just really threw you off and it was really hard to learn. Okay? So sometimes it just needs to be in our hearts in order for us to really get it. And in the case of singing a song to the Lamb for the 144,000, they can only sing it because they're the only ones who have been redeemed. It's like I'm singing a song to Jesus, thank you for saving me, when I haven't even allowed Him to save me. They're the only ones who can sing the song because they're the only ones who are redeemed. And check out the way it words it there. Notice it calls it a new song. Do you see that there? They sang in verse 3, as it were a new song before the throne. Let's see what Psalm 98 tells us. It says, "Oh, sing to the Lord a new song. For He has done marvelous things. His right hand and His holy arm have gained Him the victory." Here we have a picture of God's people who have been delivered again. God has been victorious for them. And when victory has been won, they sing a new song. I like that. Okay? It's a new song because they've had the experience of being redeemed. It's a new song because the experience in their hearts really allows them to be honest with that song. And so we can sing that song as well today. Notice in verse 3, the love of the redeemed. They not only love that experience of being redeemed, okay? It says that this 144,000 at the end of verse 3, they were redeemed from, where were they redeemed from? From the earth. Now in the book of Revelation, we often read the expression, the people of the earth, okay, or the kings of the earth, that comes from the Old Testament. This represents those who didn't want to follow Jesus, okay? Who chose the earth instead of heaven. And so when they've been redeemed from the earth, they've been redeemed from choosing anything else except Jesus as first in their lives. This is a picture of, once again, having an undivided love for Jesus. And I love it because it reflects just as He prayed for us there. And sorry, the quote is wrong there. It's actually from John 17, verses 15 through 16. "I do not pray that you should take them out of the world, but that you should keep them from the evil one. They are not of the world, just as I am not of the world." So the essence of being redeemed from the earth, it's about being in the world, but not being of the world. About being in Auckland, living here, going through the motions, okay, standing up for Jesus, but not being an Aucklander, okay, eternally, being a citizen of heaven. And so for us today, the love of the companions can be our love today, to love the story of redemption above any other, and to love Jesus more. Finally, we come to verse 4 and 5 in Revelation 14, and this is where we hit the climax, so stay with me if you can. This is the life of the companions. What is it? Can you say life? Life. This is the lifestyle they live, okay? Verses 4 and 5. "These are the ones who were not defiled with women, for they were virgins. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever He goes. These were redeemed from among men, being firstfruits to God and to the Lamb." Verse 5, "And in their mouth was found no deceit, for they are without fault before the throne of God." Remember how they had their Father's name written on their foreheads? Okay, this is a sign of who they're willing to stand up for. Then we come to verse 4 and see how pure their love is for Jesus. It says they were not defiled with women, for they were virgins. And when God's people are often referred to as women, as we see here, Jeremiah 6:2, "I have likened the daughter of Zion to a lovely and delicate woman." So I can see here a lovely and delicate woman, perhaps to us men. When God looks at his people, okay, and we see a vision of them who were virgins, these are people who were not willing to mingle themselves with anyone else, but to remain pure for Jesus. To remain pure for him. And reading further on in the verse, this is what I really love. After, it says, these, in verse 4, these are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. You know, in terms of maintaining a relationship with Jesus, it doesn't just relate to that early hour in the morning where you spend time with him, or that family worship you have in the evening. Okay? Following the Lamb wherever he goes is about you walking with him in each moment of your day. And for the army of the Lord, okay, who are still living today, for the 144,000 who are willing to stand up for Jesus more than anything, it's about being more willing to follow him than anything else. How about you today? Perhaps we could follow ourselves. Perhaps we could follow the trends of those around us. Perhaps we can follow our family and our good mates. The call for today is to follow the Lamb. And we have a great reference here from Acts of the Apostles. This really just brings it alive. It says the vision, talking about this vision here in Revelation 14 of the prophet, pictures them as standing on Mount Zion, girt for holy service, clothed in white linen, which is the righteousness of the saints. But all who follow the Lamb in heaven must first have followed him on earth, not fretfully or capriciously, but in trustful, loving, willing obedience as the flock follows the shepherd. Finally, we have a picture here of a people who want to follow Jesus, not out of compulsion, not because it looks good, but because they're willing to trust him with their lives more than anything. And as we're coming back for communion today, it's good to come back to Jesus. And just as a closing thought, I wonder if this blameless love for Jesus, if this final picture of the lifestyle of the companions will be ours today as well. You can take a note of that if you like as well. Ephesians 1 and verse 4. That just brings out the blamelessness of God's people. That's Ephesians 1 and verse 4. But before we separate for something that really is important to do before we break bread together, I'll just share this story. A number of years ago, a lighthouse was being built on the rock-bound coast of Wales. With the building nearly completed, one of the workmen stumbled and fell from the scaffolding, far down to the rocks below. The other workmen, shocked at what had taken place, didn't dare look down for fear of being unnerved by the sight of them and falling themselves. Heavy-hearted, they backed slowly down the ladders, but to their surprised and happy relief, they saw their companion lying on a mound of grass, shaken and dazed, bruised to be sure, but not seriously harmed. And beside him lay a dead lamb. A flock of sheep had been grazing near the worksite, and a lamb had broken his fall. A lamb has broken our fall as well. A lamb can still be the broken fall for us today, but we have to be willing to fall on it. Before we move into communion today, we're going to have a chance to really commit ourselves to Jesus. But I just want to ask, are you broken for Jesus? Is it him that you're falling on? Perhaps today there are some of us who may have the opportunity to fall on Jesus for the first time. Perhaps there are some of us who haven't fallen on him in a long while. And you can just feel the Lord impressing you, I've got to get things right with Jesus. Perhaps there are some of us who are stuck and have been trying for a long time to get back with him. Today might be the day to recommit your heart and to establish a new mind with him. Perhaps there are some of us who are falling on him regularly, but this needs to be your mission as well. For all of us to be falling on the Lamb. May these questions just ponder in your hearts as we now move into what Jesus did before they shared that Last Supper together. And if you're familiar with the story there in John chapter 13, our Master did something radically different. He made himself the least amongst his people. And for a day which is all about being undivided, I wonder if any of us think we're better than each other today. Or if any of us just need to get back and to remember how much of a worthy master Jesus is.